Welcome to the Good Luck Club podcast. My serial entrepreneur guest today is Max von Poelnitz. He will tell us about his experiences of building a business from scratch and what it's like to push through during the coronavirus. Max, welcome. As the founder of NOSH, one of my favorite delivery businesses, I'm excited to talk to you. Maybe we can start off the podcast by you telling our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Simon, for having me. I'm calling from beautiful Hong Kong. So a little bit about myself. I have basically lived a third of my life in the United States, a third of my life in Europe, and a third of my life in Asia. So I'm nearly 12 years now in Hong Kong and Singapore. And I started my first business in 2011, so nearly 10 years ago now. And I'm now on my fourth, well, actually, I guess maybe fifth, but so yeah, it's been a hell of a journey the last nearly decade. Before that, I was in the corporate world in real estate asset management. And I wanted to become a professional golfer when I was 18 and completely failed at that.
Well, I think there's plenty of people that wanted to be a professional golfer and failed at that. But did you actually try to do the circuit, or you just realized you weren't good enough at golf?
No, I was pretty good at 18, 19. I wanted to get in the I was very good junior player. And to be honest, I didn't commit the way you're supposed to commit. Probably learned a lot of lessons for later in life around business and how much you have to dive in full on. And at 18, I think I was just all over the place a little bit.
Straight off the bat, a great insight for our listeners there. I think, it's basically application. You can have the skill, right? But if you don't apply yourself.
Absolutely.
So what for you, what is success?
Oh yeah, you wrote me that as like the first question, and that is just a power question. To be quite frank, I think success is very difficult to define as an objective truth. I think it's a very subjective reality for most people. I think a lot of people might define it as wealth, maybe power, maybe some form of happiness in their work-life balance. I think for me, I do think I define success partially by, how free you feel, the freedom to go, do anything or invest in anything or get involved and follow your passions and follow your desires. And so it's a very kind of opaque definition.
And for your businesses like NOSH, how would you define success for that company?
Oh, well, I don't think we've even been successful, to be honest. We've had a lot of success in Asia, but we certainly have not really done anything dramatic, outside of Asia or outside of Hong Kong. Success, I guess, I would define business success, in a very kind of archaic manner around, revenue, how many staff you have, and what sort of impact you're making on your customers. So I guess I really define it as number of customers, I guess, right? Like I'm interested in how many people can experience my product or experience, our vision of what the business should promote. And that comes with customers and clients.
You're a humble entrepreneur, and I'm going to defend you for a second and say you have built a great business that's, of course, gone through highs and lows. But I personally really love what you've done, and I think you are humble. But I do think it's not easy to build a business. There's a cultural thing around what you're doing too, right? And people cooking at home and so on. It's not that easy for people to understand what you're doing. But you've done a great job. I don't like to hear you say you don't think you've achieved much. I don't agree.
No. I think we've had our ups and downs. We've had a lot of excitement. The most exciting thing that probably happened to our business was we had Alibaba invest in the company in 2016, and then we had Delivery Hero invest in the company in late 2018, which is a publicly traded company in Germany. So we've had a lot of highs, but we've also had a lot of lows. But I think the most kind of proud thing is that, you know, we serve thousands of customers. Well, now nearly more than, I mean, tens of thousands a month and a week, I guess. So I think it's that's probably the most exciting thing, is just watching people interact with the product and experiencing it and enjoying the food.
Yeah, I mean, I think without doubt, the market leader in Hong Kong. If anyone ever thinks of ordering food home, I think of you. And I also think it is a big achievement. I mean, for anyone listening in Europe or America, they still don't know Alibaba, which shocks me. I'm still surprised how many people don't know Alibaba. To me, it's like a household name, but they're one of the largest companies in the world. They're 3 times the size of Amazon, and they have invested in you. You know, that alone is an achievement. I haven't achieved that. You know, so I think, you know, I'm going to build you up for a second. I think it's important that, you know, you recognize, you do recognize it. But I do think, and this takes me on to the next thing I want to talk about, you know, like I do think sometimes as entrepreneurs, when we're in the thick of it, we don't always appreciate it, right? It's you've got a business that you built up from scratch with tens of thousands of customers. To some people sitting there right now dreaming of starting their own business, you've made it. But you're probably comparing yourself to the market leader in the US that has millions of customers, right?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest, I guess flaw, I guess you could say my biggest strength and my biggest weakness is never being satisfied. It is a real problem, but also it is the reason why I continue to push and can be accountable to myself. But it is a huge challenge. But as you said, that is why I am constantly, you know, needing more, which is kind of unhealthy, but also, I guess, you know, what keeps me going.
I think it's a superpower, actually. I think never being satisfied is actually a very important part of keep building something. Otherwise, you know, you might just have a small business forever, and that's fine for some people. But I do think that never being satisfied is drive, isn't it? I think it's drive you're identifying there.
Yeah, I mean, I think my you know, people often ask me, you know, what is, if you could distill what is important as an entrepreneur, what is important, you know, in building a business, and I typically like to say perseverance is probably one of the key kind of attributes. Now, there is a fine line between perseverance and being crazy. I certainly stayed in businesses probably a year too long or a year and a half too long, just because I've just kept grinding at it. So, but I think that the truth be told, I mean, that is, to me, the most important attribute when it comes to building a business.
I would say it's better to spend a year in a business too long than a year too short.
It's I've never thought of it that way, but I think I'm going to write that down. That's quite insightful.
Yeah, who's interviewing who right now? I'm supposed to be getting the great quotes from you. Sorry, I'm giving my own ones. But do you think entrepreneurs are born or bred, out of interest?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. I think, there you go.
Sorry, Spotify folks. Sorry.
That was an alarm. That was an alarm about this podcast that's 24 minutes late. Anyway.
That's a dig at me, folks. We started this podcast late today, but I can take it.
No, it's not. I mean, gosh, I don't know how to answer that. I do think a lot of it is actually nature. I mean, or you need to build an amazing partnership or team so that you kind of have these complementary skill sets. But if you're a singular entrepreneur, there is a lot of kind of being born with this drive and this kind of chip on your shoulder, and the ability to do sales, right? Like, you just need to do whatever it takes to get your product out there. And I don't know. I think that can be learned. But I don't know how. You know, I've always been of the belief that you learn by doing. So, you know, I guess you'd have to just keep doing, and then you could become an entrepreneur in that space.
Yeah, I think you've identified something there. There is an element of entrepreneurship, which is just going out and playing the game. Whereas if you're a doctor, you can't just start surgery, you've got to go and get some training. But I think for being an entrepreneur, that's why I say the younger you start, the better, right? I mean, what age did you start being an entrepreneur and give up the pro golfing dream?
No, I mean, you're right. I think about this a lot. I mean, the funny thing is you have the statistics that like the average successful entrepreneur starts a business at 40 in the United States. So a lot of the media spins incorrectly. But you're right. I mean, I started my first business at 27. And to be honest, the amount of energy and willingness to fail was considerably higher 10 years ago than it is now. Life does get more complicated. And as a result, your risk, you just become what more risk averse in that respect. So I do tell most people, look, the younger you can start and just dive in, the more you can fail, right? Which is the best time to do it. Yeah.
I know what you mean as well about the media. Sometimes, they throw this thing around about, the guy that started KFC was 65 and I get it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think there is an element that is missing the main point, which is often starting a business involves lots of failures before you get a success. So the younger you are, the more failures you have time to make, really, right? So, but do you think I have this theory around luck being a key ingredient to success? I actually think I was very lucky in business. Now, people are always polite and say, no, Simon, you worked hard. But actually, I worked less hard, got more lucky. But what do you think about luck? Does it play a role?
I mean, it's probably one of the largest roles. I mean, whether you call it luck or you call it timing, timing and luck are, I would say now being on the investor side, feels like it's 50% of the chance of a business succeeding. Now, what I would like to define there is I am of the belief that you can make your own luck, right? Meaning if you're going to go and get on that plane, if you're going to, go speak to that guy at a conference, if you're going to just go into that store and try to sell your product, right? You're making that first step. And then in that action, you might get lucky, right? So luck also has a lot to do with how much effort you put in. I do think that people who put in effort tend to get luckier. So there is a combination there that I find is very true.
Well, I mean, I discussed this saying, it feels like on every podcast now, but it's like the harder you work, the luckier you get is the saying that gets thrown around a lot. But I do think there is an element of, the harder you work, the sicker you get. The harder you work, the harder it gets. And I know myself, when I had my own companies, I brought someone else in to run them. I actually worked less hard and I got more successful because you kind of let go. But you just mentioned there about the investing side, and tell us a little bit about what your ethos is there, what you're doing there.
No, I mean, I've been lucky enough to meet people who, want to give me money and lucky enough to also make some money. So, we now have a small venture capital fund called New Territory Ventures, which I think you'll find kind of funny, given that it's, new territory, Hong Kong, new territory, kind of new investments. And basically, we look at B2B food tech businesses. So again, things I understand, things I know in supply chain and food tech, but it's been completely different. I mean, to step from the entrepreneur side of the table to the investor side of the table is crazy, right? It's been a lot of fun. It's been super insightful, and I really feel like I'm learning a ton every call I have with a new entrepreneur. So that's been very exciting for me personally.
I find that about doing the podcast. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, but every time I do a podcast with someone, I learn something new, which is part of it. But a lot of people would love the idea of moving from like an entrepreneur into the investor side. Is it something you're enjoying, or is it something? I mean, you mentioned the learning piece there. Do you see it as a long-term thing, or how do you feel about that world?
I do. I mean, look, I'm very early. I mean, I'm only, I'm less than a year in, so I can't really tell you yet. I mean, you need kind of 3-4 years to see, if any of your decisions actually panned out and succeeded. So it'll take me another 3 years to see if any of the companies we actually invest in actually turn a profit or give us a return. But I will say that I enjoy the energy of speaking to fellow entrepreneurs. I love being an entrepreneur and being able to give advice from entrepreneur to entrepreneur. So it feels very different than a lot of the investors I've had, right? I've had a lot of kind of financial investors or institutional investors or venture capital investors that really were never entrepreneurs. So it never felt like, they really understood my pain. And what I try to do now is have that empathy on some level, and understand, okay, I know how hard it is, but I can also call bullshit. Right? Like if you're, I know that if you're complaining about something, like I've been through that, and maybe that's not that bad. So it's a good balance, I think.
Totally. I think there needs to be more real entrepreneur investors. I was looking at the numbers when I started my own investment business. Less than 10% of VCs have actually started a startup of their own. You would have thought. You would have thought they'd lift that number up, a bit like when people do sales, they put the TV on sale, but one day they make it $1,000, and then the next day they say 50% or make it $500. But it was always $500 to begin with. You think these guys would just go and work in a startup for a week so you can lift those numbers, right? And say, I started a startup. Or register a company and say they've got one just to lift the numbers up. But it's just crazy to me. So I think there is a need for more people that have actually gone through the pain and understand it and invest. So I'm glad that you've entered the space. Do you think in your business profile, you've had a big break in what you're doing? I mean, off camera before we started the podcast, we were chatting a little bit about coronavirus and how that's affected you. How do you feel about that? Is that not that it's a big break, but these hard moments can bring around positive change, right?
I mean, look, yeah, I've had a lot of little breaks. I mean, it's certainly been very lucky, even though it's been super hard, and I've had panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and I couldn't get out of bed, or I'm crying on the phone to an investor. I've gone through all of those experiences over the last decade. And yet, of course, I've also had all the highs that come with that. So, there's really nothing better than, celebrating 1 million meals sold, or celebrating, $1 million check, or celebrating when you get your own money when you sell a business, right? And that first time when you see a real amount of money in your bank account, right? There's really nothing that can, it's very hard to explain how that feels. So certainly, that has been, I've had a lot of very good breaks. In respect to your question around COVID and the crisis, I mean, again, we have been quite fortunate being in the direct-to-consumer food delivery space with NOSH, and have benefited massively as a result of this crisis. Right, we're a super profitable cash flow business now, and we have offers to purchase the company. We have investor offers. I mean, it's quite a unique time. But that being said, it's also been just like any other roller coaster ride.
Yeah, I totally get it. Going back to your family history, I mean, your parents were entrepreneurs, or how did you go from pro golfer to entrepreneur? What was your family like?
No, I mean, don't say pro golfer.
I know, I'm labeling it.
Like good amateur golfer. No, but to be honest, I mean, no. I mean, my family, not at all entrepreneur. My uncle is both of my uncles have their own business and are extremely entrepreneurial. My uncle was a very successful entrepreneur. He ran the largest shoe company in Germany and sold it for a fortune. So really, never graduated university, sold shoes door to door, right? Like that classic, unbelievable entrepreneur story. And so that has always been something that has existed in our family, right? And something that entrepreneurialism has never been seen as a negative in my family, right? It has always been seen as a positive, and oh, by the way, your uncle's a multimillionaire because of it, right? So that's been probably one of the highest resonating things in my family. But my decision to become an entrepreneur was not by any means thought out. It was not premeditated, really. I mean, honestly, the story that I tell is quite simple, which is I was in corporate offices, and I have to wear a suit. I had to get to work at 7 a.m, always before my boss was there, and I had to always leave after my boss left. Right? You had to show the FaceTime, and it was just driving me crazy, especially if I finished all my work, within 2 hours, and then you're just sitting at your desk doing nothing, right? And it was one of those days where, it's pouring rain, you get in the office, you're soaking wet, your suit is just soaked, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? You look out the window, everyone looks like little ants, like walking into their office buildings and carrying the umbrellas, and you're just thinking to yourself, this cannot be my life. Like, I cannot do this. And literally on that day, I decided that I would stop working and I would start a business. And that was the pure impetus for it. It was a very spontaneous decision.
And you sat down, you didn't yet have an idea, and you just decided that you were going to do something, and you sat down and came up with an idea. Is that how it played out?
Yeah, I mean, the first business. So we started my first company was if your listeners are familiar in the U.S. with Blue Apron or in Europe HelloFresh, right? These are meal kit delivery businesses. So we all started at the same time, surprisingly, right? Around 2011, everyone started, U.S., Europe, and Asia, and we ran the Asian one called Secret Ingredient. And so we started this business. Primarily because consumers were starting to get more comfortable buying ingredients online. The logistics costs were coming down. And you had the proliferation of subscription services. So people were comfortable kind of buying a weekly subscription. And that started this kind of meal kit boom. And so, I just had a friend who was a chef. And he and I sat down, we looked at the industry and said, look, I think we can do this in Asia.
Yeah, Secret Ingredient. You've brought back a lovely memory. Your office was 2 minutes from mine. So used to see it, used to do some wonderful cooking classes in there and stuff. But yeah, I mean, do you think your education helped you or hindered you as far as being an entrepreneur is concerned?
Oh, well, my fiance is going to be pissed off with me saying this, but I am, I'm not really a proponent of the education system. Certainly in the United States, I don't think my college degree, really made a difference from an entrepreneurial perspective. I think it helped me meet amazing people and network, which again, look, did that benefit me in my entrepreneurial career? Not yet, but it will. I mean, a lot of my friends now from college are quite successful and, have incredible networks in the United States that I'm leveraging. So, from a network perspective, it was very powerful. But from an education perspective, honestly, I think I would have learned more selling knives door to door, and then just getting out there. Funnily enough, my father offered me when I was 18 years old to not go to university. So he said, "I'll give you $50,000 US instead of paying for university. You can just do something else." And my mother shot that down within 30 seconds. So.
I've got a son who's 3, and that day is coming. I think it's actually an interesting way to go, because not only can you turn that investment into perhaps a profit-making business, it's far better than just getting into debt and coming out the other side being taught about how risky everything is.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, that's the main problem, right? I mean, the idea of starting. I mean, think about it. It is so hard to be an entrepreneur if you're sitting on 80,000 pounds or $100,000 US of debt. Like it is so near impossible to take that leap of faith, right? So when you look in America around financial aid and how much student debt there is, that system hinders the growth of incredible ideas and incredible talent and incredible entrepreneurs, just because, to be honest, they can't risk it, right? And I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. Restrict you later. You have to earn in a startup world. It's so hard, isn't it, to earn a guaranteed monthly income, especially at the beginning. But if you have fixed costs, lots of fixed costs, like a mortgage, then these things will kind of tie you down a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, but at the same point, I mean, look, it also, I mean, it's also a driver, right? I mean, you see a lot of people, if you speak to a lot of different entrepreneurs from different backgrounds, a lot of them will say, look, like, these costs that I had were my driver, my drive to get out from underneath that. And I did it through business, right? So you do meet people who use those financial limitations to actually build something great, and really kind of lift themselves out of that. So, again, it's quite subjective on how, what people use to be the driver or the impetus to actually, succeed.
Yeah, I think for the listeners, the way I try to explain what you're saying there, in my view, and feel free to correct me if you think I've got this wrong, but I think the element you're talking about there, to me, there's two elements. One is the debt that restricts you from perhaps being able to take a risk and start something because you've got those costs. And if you start a business, there's a high chance for a few months you won't have any income to cover those costs. That's not necessarily a driver, that can be a restrictor. I think what you're talking about, in my view, there is ambition. Like myself, I had no money at a very young age. So I was very driven to get out of poverty. I was very driven to not, live in an awful place, and I wanted a nice car and all these things that we want when we're young. And in part, that's what drove me to work hard. And funnily enough, when I made enough money, I don't need to work anymore. It's very hard to motivate yourself, actually. Sounds like a difficult complaint to have, but it is a difficult thing, actually, when your driver, perhaps when you're younger, is money, and then you get money and you realize that actually money was never really the point, right? But it is a driver. I hear you. I think for a lot of people that's why I also get people like, not a good reference these days, but like Tyson, he's a good street fighter, and then he turns that into a career. But if he hadn't had it tough in the streets, he wouldn't have become a successful fighter, right? So that hardship piece is actually quite important. But I do think debt's a different thing. Debt seems to stop people.
I agree. And I think solving the student debt crisis, at least in the United States, would trigger a huge wave of entrepreneurialism. So I'm a huge proponent of solving that in the United States, and hope that the government can take some initiatives there. I think to your point, I do think, though, one of the big challenges in being an entrepreneur is you do see a lot of people, and look, I come from a well-off background, right? And so by no means can I say, look, I had a lot of hardships, and I recovered from those by any means. I do see, especially out here in Asia, I do see too many well-off entrepreneurs, meaning, these are people who can take the risk and kind of have the fallback position, or have the parachute or the net, or whatever you want to call it. And that, that is a pity, because I am a firm believer that you need to kind of go into this without a plan B. Like, if you're going to start a business, it should be plan A, and that's it. And a lot of people, and I went to business school in 2011 as well. And you hear this from a lot of MBAs who say, I'll start a business, or I'll do it part-time for a year, but worst case scenario, I can just get back my consulting job, right? If you think like that, I am a proponent that is just recipe for, mediocrity. And so I'm a big proponent of, we talked about it earlier, diving in and just getting things done and just getting your hands dirty. But in light of that, seeing it really as your only plan, right? And there is, because then you yourself cannot accept failure, because failure, I mean, this sounds so cliche, but failure is not an option, right? I mean, at least you need to believe that. And this goes back to my initial comment to you about perseverance, right? They all kind of connect in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. And I don't know, maybe with your investor hat on, when you got into the investment world, you looked at this, but what I noticed as well, there were certain investment companies that will only invest in people from Harvard or from certain schools. And in my mind, and they've done quite well, I would add, but in my mind, they were always missing a trick, because it was the hungry street fighter that you really wanted to invest in. Someone that went to Harvard's probably got a lot of options. This business works or it doesn't work. It doesn't really matter. So, but it's interesting because there are a lot of, let's take Mark Zuckerberg's of this world, Bill Gates of this world, who have all come from that ecosystem. You can argue that they came from well-off families, but they still had the hunger to follow through somehow. But I agree, generally, you need that hunger. No plan B is totally right. But what do you think about that? What do you think these companies that have this thesis that you should only invest in people from Harvard?
Oh, I mean, from a purely investor standpoint, and this is going to sound terrible, I'll give you an example. I mean, we definitely, in my fund, we look at Goldman Sachs alumni, Uber alumni, Stanford alumni, and INSEAD alumni. Those are some of our networks that we use. And so, it is, I do agree with your premise. The problem is, in the world we live in, and this is terrible to say, but the world we live in, so much of early success in the startup world often comes down to who you know, how much you could fundraise, who's your first client, who's your first investor, who's talking about you, who writes a press release on you, right? Like these connections, these network effects, sadly, are still so important for other investors, for clients, and so ultimately for early success. And so, that is why you see so many funds invest in what you're calling kind of network communities, because they believe that network community can give that entrepreneur a leg up. And I will be honest. I mean, look, the Uber alumni network, which we do we look at deals. These are basically ex-Uber staff who are starting their own businesses, and Sam and I get insight into their businesses, right, to invest in. I mean, they really do have a leg up. I mein, they have scaled a business around the globe. I mean, these are people I want to invest in, right? They have an incredible experience. And I often would much rather invest in them than, a great idea by a first-time entrepreneur. I am a huge proponent that execution always trumps an idea. And so that's my investment thesis.
Yeah, and I understand it. It's an interesting, they're almost like a walking conflict in some respects, though, because those people have so many choices and so many options. That that they can have a plan B and a plan C. They can try this thing. If it doesn't work, it's not the end. So it's kind of, they're kind of in conflict with each other, isn't it? Having said that, I think it's a fascinating point. I know even for myself that in my career I've had some lucky moments. That's why I've got a podcast called The Good Luck Club, because I think it was luck that made me successful, and I like debating it. But it was really, I could tap into someone else's network. I didn't need to go to university to get a network. I just needed to know Max. And I needed Max to like what I was doing and what I was about, and then you would help me plug into those networks.
But that goes back to your initial question, which is, is it nurture over nature, being an entrepreneur? I mean, what you seem to suggest there is that nature plays a huge role, because you need to be the kind of person then who, networks and is, out there and meeting people and connecting, because that is such a central piece. Now, that is something that can be learned, but really is a personality trait.
I wonder. I mean, I if I 31 podcast interviews ago, I probably would have agreed with you. And since interviewing, I mean, I just interviewed a guy. He's basically, his opening statement is, "I am very shy," and he's incredibly shy. I'm just reading my son, the Little Mr. Men book at the moment, and one of them is Little Miss Shy. He's by no admission, he's super, super shy and super nice. And he basically, due to his shyness, his clients used to have to come to his office and go into his office. And eventually he built a relationship up with someone quite well known in Hong Kong who gave him the money to open up his own restaurant group. And now he's got a massive restaurant chain called Womalulu. And he has designed 600 restaurants for people inside his office in a shy way. And through that network, he's built up slowly. He's become very successful. My point is that is it a personality trait, or is it just persistence? Or is it application, or is it a good idea? What is the matrix there? And I know what you mean. I maybe we could have a whole separate podcast just about the concept of investment and a thesis around investment. I think that would be an interesting conversation to have, because I think this could go very deep very quickly. And the podcast purpose today is to talk about your story. But just finishing off, you must be investing in entrepreneurs that are shy. Mark Zuckerberg is hardly an outgoing personality. Do you think it was just his contacts at Harvard that made him successful?
Well, no, I mean, I focus more on the team. So I have, you talk about my experience, right? I've been a co-founder and I've been a founder. And I've had all the problems of dealing with co-founders, and I've had all the problems of being a lone founder. And all I can say is I am a huge proponent of building a business as a team. Either with one other person or two other people or three other people, right? Like it is building a business, being an entrepreneur is a very, very lonely exercise. And having a partner in crime, a co-founder, and like you said, right, if one is shy and one is not, that's a great complementary skill set, right? So by no means is there a quote unquote personality trait to be a successful entrepreneur. I think I look more at the team dynamic and how the team handles things. And all I could say to people listening here is my number one recommendation if you're starting a business is go find a partner. It really is just more fun to build it with someone else. It's more exciting. You get someone to share things with, and you get someone to share things with when it's really shit.
At NOSH, you are the only founder. You don't have a co-founder, right?
Yeah. So this business I founded myself.
Why have you not brought a co-founder in? Is it just not found the right?
We started another business, Spoonful, which was a corporate platform, a corporate catering platform, and that I did have a co-founder, and actually she became my co-founder late. So she joined, worked with me for 2 years, and then she became my co-founder, right? A lot of people have this thought process that, you start off as co-founders. The truth is no, there's plenty of businesses where people join, and maybe it wasn't their idea, but they work their ass off and they fall in love with the business and become so passionate that ultimately the CEO and founders like, we need to be partners in crime in this. You need to have a co-founder title. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about, how to become an entrepreneur. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have an idea. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you have to be there from the beginning. So yes, I have had both co-founders and done things on my own.
I think that's a great insight for the listeners to pick up on. I think there's two elements I want the audience to make sure you don't forget. One is that you can still go join someone else's company, even if it was up and running, and become a co-founder in that business. A co-founder is not we started it together founder, it's we're in it together. So I think that's really important. And second, if you're working in a business today, why don't you ask to become the co-founder if you think you're good enough? I think step up. And equally, if you're running a business right now and you feel alone, but you can see in your company there's someone there that's making it work, maybe consider making them your co-founder. I think it's a really interesting point. I have actually done it myself. I've never articulated it as you just articulated it, but I've done it myself. I've started a business myself, and then over time, great people have joined, and then eventually become co-founders, and then they replace me as CEO, and they're doing a better job than me in running some of these businesses. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. So I'm also thinking there's hope that I could come and be your co-founder at NOSH. Just need to spend 2 years proving myself to you.
Yeah, you got to put in the time, Simon.
So anyone wants to apply to Max's company, we'll put the links down below. You feel free. We're running a competition right now. If you think you could be his co-founder, just enter his website, send him an email. I'll put his mobile phone number down there too, of course, guys. So you just ring him anytime, day or night. Feel free. We had 50,000 downloads last month. You should be fine. So wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I'd just like to wrap up. I guess this is kind of a light-hearted question at the end. I definitely want to have you back, and I'd like to talk about investment and all these other things in depth. But if you went back to your younger self and gave, let's say, Max, the pro golfer, a tip, what would your tip be to yourself? What would your advice be to your younger self?
Oh man, you got all these deep questions.
This is meant to be a light-hearted one, just for the record.
This isn't that lighthearted. I mean, what would I tell my younger self? I would probably tell my younger self to focus more. I have the type of personality where I want to try to be good at everything, right? And I want to do a little bit of everything. And certainly when I was younger, I very much behaved that way. And I should have at an earlier age, really, focused on one area and just dove deeply into that, whatever that might have been.
Well, I'm going to sum up what I've taken away for the audience. I always like to sum up at the end, because if people just listen to the end, then they have to go listen to the whole podcast to get the context of each of these points. But I like the personality trait that you have that I think is very healthy, actually, which is never be satisfied. I think that continually improves your business and hopefully yourself too. I absolutely love, and I often have said, that freedom, just like you, freedom is really what success is. I think that's such a great word to hold up as freedom, the ability to do what you want every day. That is success to me too. So I love it when I hear that, because I totally agree with you. I also think the no plan B thing, even if you've got access to a plan B because of your network, it's still a good mindset to have. No plan B is a great mindset to have. And if you can be, if you come from a privileged background and you can have that attitude, I think you'd be successful. Equally, if you don't come from a privileged background and you don't have a plan B, you can also be successful. So it's kind of actually universal. I love the idea of promote someone to co-founder, or you can become a co-founder through hard work, and you don't need to have the original idea. I think a lot of people misunderstand the co-founder brand name, and I think it's a good point to remember. I also like the point you mentioned during the podcast about how someone, if they build a team around them, they don't necessarily need to have the entrepreneurial traits. And I have seen, for example, accountants build pretty good businesses by hiring good entrepreneurial talent or brought in as partners, good entrepreneurial talent. So the team is definitely a way, if you're out there and you want to start a business of your own, but you don't think you're a typical entrepreneur, you can build a team around you that is through a co-founder partnership system and or motivation around the purpose of your business. So focus more, folks. That was the end point from Max, which is totally also true. And I want to thank you, Max, for your time and your insights. And I look forward to having you back on the show very soon. And thanks.
Good to see you, Simon.
Yeah,
it's been a long time. I look forward to it as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to the Good Luck Club podcast. We know you have thousands of podcasts you could be listening to, and you've chosen us. We, of course, feel lucky. If you want to hear more, please go to thegoodluckpod.com or go to any of our social media pages and share with us your views, your insights, and any way that we can improve what we're doing to make it a better experience for you. We wish you the best of luck.